Welcome to Tech Nuts, a podcast by Inwedo, where we explore how innovation really works in practice. This episode is all about Excel, specifically why the spreadsheets that many organizations rely on every day have become one of the most expensive systems they own. Errors, version chaos, and manual data transfers are the Excel costs you deal with directly. But alongside them, other costs are growing, unnoticed. In this episode, we'll show you how Excel becomes your operating system, what really makes up its true cost, what risks it creates, why organizations wait so long to make the switch, and how to figure out which processes are worth moving first so you can take back control. So how do critical processes end up running on Excel in the first place? A spreadsheet is usually the first tool people reach for when they need to calculate, compare, or track something. It's universal, accessible, and easy to use, so anyone can start working with it immediately. Packy McCormick, the American technology analyst, called Excel probably the most influential piece of software ever built, and it's hard to disagree. For many business uses, it works remarkably well. The problem starts when processes that began in a spreadsheet stay there long after their complexity outgrew what the tool can handle. A sheet for tracking orders becomes an order management system used across departments. Next to it grows a contractor billing file and a resource planning sheet, each built for the moment, for a specific need. People reach for Excel to get their work done efficiently, and over time, their individual sheets add up to a patchwork system the whole organization ends up depending on. So, what makes the cost of Excel grow? The clearest way to see it is with an example you can count to the dollar. In 2003, Canadian energy company TransAlta lost $24 million, 10% of its annual profit, because of a spreadsheet error. High bids were mapped to the wrong contracts, and the company overpaid on every single one. CEO Steve Snyder publicly confirmed it was, quote, literally a cut and paste error in an Excel spreadsheet. That's a spectacular example, but the mechanism behind it is common. The difference is that in most organizations, losses spread across hundreds of small errors that nobody ever counts. What does this look like at scale? Raymond Panko's research, conducted over more than 20 years, shows that 88 to 94% of operational spreadsheets contain errors. 82% of those are logic errors, not typos, but mistakes baked into the structure, incorrect formulas or ranges, references to wrong cells, rows left out of calculations. What's more concerning, 86% of spreadsheet creators are confident their files are correct, and individual inspections catch only 63% of errors. This means many strategic decisions are based on data that's simply wrong, and nobody knows it. But even accurate data won't support decision-making if you can't cross-reference it. Imagine 3 departments record the same product name 3 different ways. One uses an internal code, another a trade name, a third an abbreviation. Each is correct within its own convention. To the spreadsheet, though, these are 3 different products. Combining that data in a report ends in either manual, line-by-line comparison or a flawed report that slips through unnoticed. Excel stays consistent only when everyone sticks to the same rules. With multiple sheets and a dozen people, that discipline breaks down sooner or later. Within a single sheet, you can set up shared conventions, drop down lists, fixed values, but even those usually lose to the realities of daily work. On top of that, there's the problem of mixing the data layer with the presentation layer. A merged cell holding 2 types of data is unreadable to anything except a human eye. A pivot table won't process it, and a formula can't extract a single value from it. Excel works well for handling data or for displaying it, not both at the same time. With every formatting tweak, the sheet holds less data you can actually rely on. A separate issue is version chaos. Every copy of a spreadsheet sent by email, edited, and passed along is potentially a different version of the data. The more copies, the harder it is to identify the actual source of truth. Before making a decision, someone first has to figure out which version is current, and that means comparing files manually. There's also no audit trail. Excel doesn't record who changed what and when. If an error appears somewhere in the sheet, it's hard to trace where it came from and how far it spread. The more sheets, people, and processes, the more situations like these pile up. Each one alone may seem like a minor inconvenience, but together they mean skilled people spend their time verifying data and putting out fires rather than doing work that actually moves the organization forward. There's another layer that gets talked about less. An organization running its processes on Excel is exposed to losses that don't show up in any spreadsheet. Missed opportunities, leaks of confidential information, and downtime when the one person who knows the sheet isn't available. Let's start with the first dimension. You don't know how much you're losing or how much you could gain. Connections between orders and inventory levels, patterns in purchase history, correlations between seasonality and raw material consumption. This information gets collected in spreadsheets for years and could point to growth opportunities and risks. But without a tool that surfaces those patterns, the organization reacts instead of anticipating. It sees yesterday's state, maybe today's, but not the trend. A good example is a Polish ultra-fresh food producer that planned production in scattered spreadsheets. When the data from Excel moved into a shared production planning system, one of the first orders triggered an alert. 2 tons of fresh spinach weren't needed. The system monitored inventory in real time and caught what's easy to miss at that order volume. The planning team stopped checking every order line by line and could focus on the work they were actually hired for. The benefit didn't stop at individual orders. The company also gained the ability to plan production 52 weeks ahead, so it could negotiate supplier terms in advance and match production capacity to seasonal demand shifts. The second dimension of risk is data security. In 2023, the Police Service of Northern Ireland, responding to a routine staffing query, publicly released an Excel spreadsheet. A hidden tab in that file contained the personal data of nearly 9,500 officers, names, ranks, and positions. Before anyone noticed, the file had been publicly accessible for over 2 hours, long enough for the data to reach paramilitary groups. The chief constable resigned, and the UK data protection regulator fined the institution £750,000, reduced from the original £5.6 million, because it's a public institution. Similar incidents in everyday business aren't hard to imagine. An Excel file, once sent by email, takes on a life of its own. Your organization has no way to check who opened it, who forwarded it, or what they did with it. An employee might drop it into ChatGPT to speed up a report, and suddenly confidential data lands on servers nobody in the organization has any control over. A security policy sets the rules, but it doesn't enforce them on its own. To actually control how data moves, you also need tools that log access, restrict sharing, and minimize risk. The third dimension is dependency on one person. In many organizations, there's someone who knows, as they say, that Excel inside out. They know which formulas depend on what, why column C is hidden, and where the numbers in the summary come from. It's usually someone with deep knowledge of the business process who built the sheet in the first place. Without them, nobody can fix a broken formula or explain why the report numbers look wrong. If they're on vacation or sick leave and something breaks, the process waits at best. A tool meant for the whole team ends up depending on one person's availability. This also applies to anything that requires interpretation. Routine entries, anyone can handle those. But when an exception comes up, a non-standard order, a sudden change, Excel won't tell you what to do. The sheet stores data, But the logic behind the organization's operational decisions exists only in someone's head. And when that person leaves, the organization has not one problem, but two: who replaces them, and how to keep the process running before anyone learns the sheet well enough to manage it. Given the costs and risks that come with running day-to-day operations in Excel, here's the question: why do organizations wait so long to make the switch? The decision to move processes out of Excel rarely happens proactively. It's usually triggered by a breaking point, when the problems have piled up too far to ignore, or an incident that hits profitability or reputation. That caution is understandable. If you've been through an implementation that took longer and cost more than planned, you have good reason to approach the next one carefully. But caution has a price too. And it isn't implementation risk, it's losing control over when and how the change eventually happens. Waiting doesn't remove the problem. Spreadsheet complexity and interdependencies grow, data and processes accumulate, and people settle deeper into their current way of working. An organization that today has room to choose the scope, pace, and timing of change may not have that room in a few years. And when everything has to be done as fast as possible, the project becomes far more prone to errors, delays, and budget overruns. Which brings us to the practical question: how do you figure out which Excel processes are costing your organization the most, and which ones to tackle first? There are three things to do. First, inventory the spreadsheets that specific processes can't run without. Second, assess each of those processes for operational complexity and business impact. Third, calculate how many hours per week your people spend manually maintaining those processes and what that costs. You also need to factor in losses from spreadsheet errors. To help with that, we've built an AI assistant that walks you through this inventory step by step. Based on your answers, it maps out what can stay in Excel, what's worth putting on the change roadmap for the coming year, and which processes carry enough risk that it's worth acting now. The assistant doesn't require access to your systems or confidential data. You'll find the link in the episode description. Excel isn't the problem in itself. The problem is the moment when it becomes your organization's operating system, even though it was never built for that. The bill grows quietly, in hours spent verifying data, in decisions made on uncertain numbers, in risks you don't see until they materialize. The most effective way to take back control is to start with an inventory and deliberately choose where to begin before the situation forces your hand. If you want to go deeper than the assistant and run a thorough analysis of a specific process, planning its exit from Excel with your systems and dependencies in mind, get in touch. We start with a 30-minute conversation to understand your situation and figure out what a detailed analysis would look like. You'll find the link in the episode description. Thanks for listening. And if this episode was valuable, subscribe to the podcast to stay in the loop. Until next time.